Today, I've got a special guest. So I'm actually going to, Iain, I'm going to bring you up right here. This is my friend, Iain Campbell. We met on an airplane. Sometimes you have the good luck of sitting next to somebody, and good things happen from that. I was returning from our nature journaling trip in Tanzania, and met this fellow who has amazing stories to tell, is a ecologist and bird watcher, and also an amazing visual thinker. And he has recently published this book, Habitats of the World. And we're going to be kind of cracking this open. And I think you're going to see that when we kind of get into this book and the thinking that is behind it, it's a really rich way of thinking about ecosystems that is very visual and intuitive. And as you look through it, you'll see that there's a lot of ideas that I can apply to my own nature journaling and practice that kind of helps us kind of get beyond what bird is that? I'm going to write down its name and check it off, or the sort of sketching corollary of that. What bird is that? I'm going to draw it and then check it off. How can you start to kind of get yourself to sort of think more broadly and get more out of any experience in nature? Iain, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Really, really delighted that you can, first of all, that you made this book, because this is just the sort of stuff that I love geeking out on. And you went deep geek on creating this.
I geeked big time.
And I thought that maybe it would be, it might be useful for us. Kind of a fun way to start would just be, I want to maybe lead with some of your cross-section thinking.
Okay.
And these as a way of habitat visualization. So when I was in the rainforest in Ecuador, I was thinking like, oh, I want to do a landscape sketch. And I look around, and all these sort of trees around me, and like, how do I, if I start to try to draw that, I get a few trees with some dense foliage behind it, but I don't really kind of end up getting a sense of that place. And in the way that you have been visualizing habitats, you've had to play with this idea and solve a lot of visual thinking ideas. Here, let me bring on, I'm just going to share a screen here for a moment. All right, so here's the cover of that book. Take a screenshot of this. I'm going to encourage my nature journaling friends. This is the kind of thing that I think you're going to find that this is the sort of thing that we really kind of do. This is our jam. So it's a beautiful book, and what you do is you are taking us through all of the different sort of biological regions on the entire planet. Mm-hmm. And looking at what are the factors that kind of really come into affect it. And one of the ways that you found to visualize it are these cross sections. And so maybe this I think is genius. So tell us a little bit about what you were thinking, kind of how this came about, and why this is such a useful innovation for this kind of geeking out.
Okay, so the original brief was to look at habitats and describe them in a way that incorporated wildlife into the habitat rather than just have it as a botanical classification. So this is not a vegetation book as such. And I was looking at different ways of doing it. So at one point, every forest and every habitat, I said, okay, at at eye level, how far can you see? All right, so at eye level, I can see 50 feet on and still get 50% visual. But then on the ground, I can only see 15 feet, but in the canopy, I can see for miles. That didn't work. That was one way. And so I couldn't describe that. That didn't help people feel it. And then I looked at, all right, well, we just do straight photos and we have photos taken at different angles. Well, that didn't work either. And so
so you're saying, just to kind of interrupt you for a second. So you're saying that when you took these photographs, you got this sort of photograph that just sort of looked like a mishmash of vegetation, but you weren't
a lot of habitat photos. If you look at a habitat photo of the eastern US and a habitat photo of at a distance of some rainforest, especially Australian rainforest, they can actually look pretty similar. I mean, you know, the eastern US, the deciduous forests, big leaves. It's remarkable how similar they look. Whereas when you're inside, they feel completely different. And I was struggling with that. And then I went to your conference in Monterey, and I heard the talk by, I think it was Abby. I can't remember her last name, but it was about seabirds in southern in New Zealand. And I'd been in that forest, and she had this watercolor, and it made me feel like I was in that forest far more than any photograph I'd seen of it. So it hit me, okay, all right, well, how can an image be more powerful in telling me, in giving me the feeling of what it's like being there than an actual photograph? And that's when I went away and started playing with it. So I thought, all right, I have no artistic ability. I cannot draw. I sat in on a couple of classes at that conference. Yeah, and managed to do an okay sea lion, but you know, that's not my gig. So that's when I went back and thought, all right, what can I do to make it just really feel like that? And that's when I went into the silhouettes and started making the silhouettes. And to a degree, it started off being just a general one, and then I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, hang on, if I change that slightly, that feels exactly like it, to a point where some of these silhouettes that I've created, if you're from Southern Africa, you can recognize that protea, and you know that that's that kind of fine boss. Or you're in Australia and you can recognize exactly that tree, that is it. And it gives you, without needing the photograph. I think I've got you might have a slide of that.
Yes. Let me pull that up again. So we're going to share screen, share keynote, and play. So, so when we're saying you're sort of creating these, before we kind of jump down to that photograph, I've got this little kind of red icon of the explorer here, or the little explorer down here. And that gives me sort of a sense of scale. I get a sense of the density of this and how difficult it would be to kind of move through here. And you're also giving me sort of a sense of the kind of cover at different heights.
Yes. And all to give someone a feeling of what it is like to observe animals there. So again, the book is not just about, it's not a vegetation book. It's actually a book about what it's like to be in these forests. It goes through the ecology, how they form, how they relate to each other. There's some pretty hardcore science in there, but it's put in a way that makes it useful. So that's why we needed all these visualizations to make it accessible to people. So
let's just think about this this image in front of us as kind of nature journalers out there in the field. Notice what Iain is leaving out. what Iain is leaving out here that makes this both kind of graphically, visually really clear, as well as easier to draw, right? Because this is we're looking at a strategy here that we can start to incorporate into our own nature journals. This little, like, if you get yourself a dark Tombow pen, you'd be able to create this same sort of look and feel as a little on the ground sketch really quickly by not doing a full portrait of the tree. And here I'm drawing all the leaf. Instead of doing that, just having this shape, you would be able to kind of create these images much more quickly. And also notice that by kind of just having a slice through the forest, you get a sense of the density of it. You're not including the stuff in the background. So the trees behind the trees behind the trees. So I'm guessing that you have a certain kind of general width of the strip that you're cutting through. And that within that, you're going to find this density of trees. This is such, and you know, like here you got your sense of like how much ground vegetation there is. Here, not very much, right? Then there's a big bare spot. Then there's density. That I think this is really useful to me in terms of thinking about how can I quickly get some data and information about a place on the ground. Let's take a look at, so here is, where are we here?
This is Tandayapa Bird Lodge in Ecuador, and this is an older photo. You were just there, Jack, and that hill in the mid distance is completely regenerated now. But this photograph was taken in the early 2000s, so now on that slope in the distance, that's completely uniform. But I put this in to show people about clearing and regeneration. This is actually a regeneration photo, but in here you see on the left in the distance, I can tell that it's cloud forest by the horizontal structure of some of the trees, but overall you can't really see what that forest is like to be in. But
you're right. You know, I look at this and I could be here someplace in California where I've got bay trees that are kind of windswept that sometimes take a little linear appearance.
Oh, that crumbles. Yeah, that's very cool.
And I don't have a real intuitive sense of what it's like to drop into this forest.
Yeah.
So so if I were to sit here and do a landscape drawing of this, I would not be capturing a lot of information. Similarly, if I'm down in the forest, looking here in the bottom left-hand corner, kind of looking out through it, it's just such a dense tangle in here that I can't really understand the structure of it by either looking at this distance view or this little kind of close-up moment. However, you ready for the next slide?
Yeah, go for it.
Boom. Kaboom. This is what it was like. So I was just there, folks. It's really cool. And this really feels to me like that forest. You've got a suggestion of there are these trees with big vines on them. There's sort of middle distance things. There's a lot of stuff in the understory here, right?
So the understory, yeah, where you've got the tiniest bit of light and the light gap, the understory thickens up dramatically. But you do have many more light gaps coming through.
So I just want to sort of point this out. So look at on this drawing here, in this gap here with no big trees in it, there's a lot of vegetation down here. Then look underneath these trees on the right, drop down there, and there's some more sort of bare spots.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
And that becomes even more prominent the further south you go. So this is actual, I'm now at a point where I'm going back and doing all of these again. I'm doing these illustrations over and over and getting to a point where I can say, all right, given a certain angle, certain slope type, this is the kind of silhouette I expect. So I just started doing that for the whole world again when COVID hit and kind of put the kibosh on that. But you'll see later on when we go through the Africa stuff, it does get to pretty detailed at times. I left this in here for you because this is one of the first general cloud forest kind of images that I created. I started refining it much more. And again, I can't draw, but what I can do is find the kinds of trees that I want and photograph them, turn it into a silhouette, and then look at what makes one tree different from another, and modify the silhouettes a little bit, and then make it. So the first ones I did were taken from stockpiles of silhouettes of some of the silhouette of a fir, silhouette of a spruce. And then the more and more I did it, I got down to a point of, okay, I'm right down into species level on some of these silhouettes.
So if somebody is doing this by hand, just sort of folks do notice just in those kind of tree masses up there, what a difference it makes to have a few of those little sky holes poking through. Just visually, it feels much more like a tree. So if you're doing this with your little Tombow pen, you'd want to be leaving some of those little sky holes. It'd be really tempting just to, once you start filling things in, just to fill everything in. But some of those little places where light can pop through gives you, the thing feels much less like a lollipop and much more like a tree. So these are based on photographs or from photographs that you've then turned that into a silhouette that you can, but for people who are doing this freehand, just sort of notice, we've talked before about the idea of consistently inconsistent. So something that is greater, that you're not sort of finding sort of bumps of all the same sort of size and shape, and that you've got these sort of consistently inconsistent things, and that with the sky holes really makes those feel like trees.
Yeah, it wasn't. I did manipulate them a lot, even though I did it from an original stencil per tree type. I did manipulate it a lot because often a photograph just didn't tell the story. That's actually becoming more common in Australia now that I've moved back to Australia, and I'm redoing a lot of these based on what was the old landscape management through Aboriginals. Aboriginals maintained a lot of the Australian landscape through fire. So it looks very different from even what we see now. So you can go and look at a forest, and it all just looks like a bunch of trees. But when you take a really good look at it, the shape that some of these trees are growing and where they used to change shapes, like this one here with it looks like a lollipop with more weight on the left. Yeah, that one there. Yeah, that's actually very common in Australian forests, where the lollipop actually isn't where you'd expect it now. It isn't the shape that you'd expect it based on the current vegetation. So I did end up spending a lot more time with that as the project went on. So
should we take a look at a different forest?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so where are we now?
This is Mallee, and here's something. I'm just going to dive into botany for a second, and ecology, and upset some of the Europeans out there. Sorry, guys. The way biomes work in when they're classified around the world, generally, the Australian forests are kind of one of those annoying ones that the northern hemisphere don't like dealing with, where they will put a habitat, an Australian eucalypt forest or an Australian eucalypt woodland, even mulgas, which are acacias. The Europeans will tend to classify them as a type of heathland. So they'll throw a forest with some of the tallest trees in the world in the same biome as California, as coastal California, and the Mediterranean biome. And then they'll put other ones, in then the Americans tend to put the same kind of things as temperate forests, even though descriptions of temperate forests are always or generally about being deciduous or semi-deciduous, where they're just not. So I've taken the Australian habitats out. Those scleriferous habitats, so these are the ones with a big, thick, leathery leaves. I've taken them out as their own biome. We'll get onto that later on, but I just need to say that before we look at this. So this is mallee, and it's really hard to show people the feeling of that. That was one of those other ones that's hard to show people and describe what it's like being in it. And that's why I use the silhouette. Have a look at the silhouette now. And this is in southwestern Australia and southeastern Australia, but it's in the southern, and it's where you have a winter rainfall. So it's a deserty environment, but with a winter rainfall regime. And it looks, you get some of these kinds of shaped trees in Europe and in England where they've coppiced. Coppicing is where you cut the branches down right around the base of the tree, and they keep sprouting up individually. But this is a natural,
big bumps at the bottom.
Yep. Yeah.
So now I want folks to sort of to imagine yourself, you're here, and think of the sketch that you would make of the landscape and how kind of quickly confused that drawing could get. But this then is something that we could do to really sort of represent that place more quickly, and I think more effectively. And it also, this kind of gets you thinking about what is, at these different levels. What is the ground cover? Here we're seeing kind of these clumps, perhaps bunch grasses. And then sort of the scattered trees, dense above, and then clear zone below. We go back here, we're seeing that same structure, but the minute you start filling in your landscape drawing the stuff that is behind here, you lose the fact that this has leaves up on the top. These have leaves up on the top, and then they're just all clear below. So this approach is a great way to do things.
And actually, the photograph that I'm using there, it's interesting because I had to use a photograph which was atypical of that habitat. And what I mean by that is that the photo, the mallee is usually much thicker than that photo. It's just that when you show a photo where it's too thick, it gets completely lost. So I had to use an example that was not typical of that habitat. Usually mallee.
You wanted your photograph to show, say, the structure of these trees here.
And I couldn't do that with most habitat, yeah.
And you couldn't do that within the typical habitat. But then you kind of get back here and you can show the typical habitat and the density, because this does feel like you're much more kind of closed in.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's really cool.
It's one of the most dangerous habitats to walk around. You get lost very quickly.
Oh,
so if I go off trail in a rainforest, I can usually work my way, work out where I am and get back. I grew up, it was 7 hours drive my closest patch, but when I was a teenager, I was going out into this stuff a lot, and you learn pretty quickly that this is dangerous. A dangerous.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because also it's usually on these dead flat plains.
Yeah, so there's no peak to orient yourself by. If you weren't paying attention to sun position, then which way is back to the road? You'd be completely turned around. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's also even though it's an open habitat underneath, but that layer at about 10 feet can be so thick that even when there is sunlight, the dappling makes you lose any idea of which way you're walking. So
that's really interesting. And you get a sense of that kind of the density of this just by filling in on the tops of those. Yeah. So I want to then kind of get folks to sort of think about this. If we're doing this in our nature journals, so Iain was talking about the importance of thinking about not just plants and animals. So it'd be interesting to sort of talk about why this isn't a book of, say, plant zones, but you're also thinking about animals. I could imagine something like this, if I had a diagram like this, it'd be really neat to add in little lines showing where I'm finding different sorts of species. So if I find these kind of birds down on the ground, I'm going to have just a few little dots drawn down here with a line going to that saying what those are. Other things are up in this. This would be a great place to start to include notes about the relationships of the animals in these places to the habitat structure.
There's actually a diagram in the book where I'm not sure you've got it there, but where I do that, where I talk about habitats changing, but at different levels in the canopy. So these habitats are all merging into each other. Okay, sometimes it's a mosaic, sometimes it's a melange, but what you can have as one habitat merges into another, yet it merges at ground level differently than at canopy. So when you go from, say, a rainforest, a subtropical rainforest, into a wet sclerophyll, the difference is that the canopy is eucalypt in the sclerophyll, non-eucalypt broadleaf in the rainforest. Underneath, they're exactly the same. And then that blends into dry sclerophyll forest. But what happens is the animals are blending at the bottom, and then there's in the mid canopy it's different, and on the top it's different again. And I do that in a couple of the places.
If you tell me the page number, I can open it up to the book up to that page and then put that on a document camera. But maybe we don't want you. But that would be we'll do a page flip on this book in a little bit here.
Okay.
But because this isn't the only type of visualization of habitats that you're including for each of the habitat types that you're looking at. Should we look at a different kind of visualization for these?
Sure.
So tell us about what we're seeing here. Okay.
So what we've got to go into metric to make this work. Okay. But there's a basic scheme that was developed by Walter and Light in the 60s, where they plotted degrees Celsius average temperature through the months against precipitation, and they started them both at 0, and for every 10 degrees Celsius, which is a more or less 20 degrees Fahrenheit, you have on the left hand side you have precipitation plotted at 20 millimeters. And so 20 millimeters is, more or less an inch. And when you plot them, you can't really see it on this one, but it'll get more important in savanna. There are 3 states of water. One, where you're getting over 100 millimeters against about 4 inches of rain a month. It doesn't matter the temperature. No matter where you are in the world, it doesn't matter the temperature, you've got excess water, okay? When you have the line that with the dotted line ever crosses above the solid line, you're in stress conditions. That means you're getting a drought.
So the dotted line, again, this is our temperature? The
dotted line is your temperature through the year.
So you're saying, so if this temperature line gets up above the water line,
in that situation you have plant stress.
Okay.
Now what's interesting is even in some rainforests you can have that, but it's got to be for a very short period. So plants can be stressed, and there are these habitats where you can have rainforest. It can be crazy amounts of rain all through the year, and then 3 months of plant stress, and it changes the whole forest. And it's analogous to us. We can be eating like crazy or drinking like crazy for 360 days of the year. 5 days without water, we're dead. So let's go to the next one, and you'll see, you'll get an idea of what I'm. So again, this is this is a tropical desert. The rainfall is always well below that temperature line, which means there's never a time throughout the year, on average, where you've got surplus water and the plants are growing well. Now, your deserts, let's say if this was Tucson, you would have a spike in the middle of the year, and you'd have a period where there is excess water.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the deserts do have spikes where there's excess water.
Yeah, we get these when we can get these big sort of mega events giving us super blooms in our desert. Yeah, yep. So this never has that. You know, this I'm going to just so oops, I didn't mean to.
No, it's okay.
Oops, no spoilers. All right. So this reminds me, I'm going to stop the share just for a moment and jump over to a different screen here. When I was writing my book about the Sierra Nevada mountains,
yep.
I was starting to think about some of these same things, and it's kind of fun to see that you know, here is a graph that I created with, so temperature is the bars,
yep,
min and max, and the blue line there is the precipitation. So in this season here, this is the dry zone, the dry season for my plants in the Sierra Nevada, and they have to kind of, oops.
And looking at that graph, I can see that regardless of where that was in the world, sorry, assuming that that's in the Northern Hemisphere, I can spot that that's a Mediterranean climate.
Yes.
Mediterranean climate, that's almost certainly Mediterranean vegetation, right where that graph is. And even on the same hill, that graph can change.
Sorry, my little dock camera keeps cutting out here, so I'm going to go back to this. So it's thinking about those same. Hold on a moment. There we are. So I was trying to think about those same sort of things, but never really realized that there are kind of worldwide patterns when you kind of map these different sorts of things that will tell you a story about those organisms. Let's jump back to some more of the visualizations that you created to help people think about this habitat.
All right.
Should we look at the next one?
Yep. Let's look at the next one. This is where it gets tricky, right? So this area of blue, and you see on the graph, you can see that it goes logarithmic above 100. So above 4 inches of rain a month, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you've got, in those months, whether you've got 8 inches or whether you've got 20 inches. There's so much water that no plants are ever undergoing plant stress. And this method was originally illustrated in a very different way. I changed it, illustrated it by using color and using where the lines are to make it more intuitive for a month. You should be able to look at this and say, oh, okay, so June through September, it rains a lot.
Yep.
There's a lot of blue. So what happens here is you've got tropical savanna. Overall, there's a number which tends to around that 1,200 millimeters a year. So again, that's 36 inches a year. That seems to be the barrier between savannas and rainforests all over the world. It's a very uniform kind of barrier. And what it's, so where you get that rain through the year isn't as important, but looking here, so this is obviously, you look at here, the temperature is highest in the middle of the year, So it's Northern Hemisphere. I think that this is actually Bamako from Mali. But you see that you have these long months of plant stress. So even though there's a lot of rain in the middle of the year, it doesn't matter. You're going to have savanna. You can't have rainforest here. Those plants can't go in a stress environment, in a high stress environment from October right through to May in this orange zone and still be broadleaf evergreen plants. They just can't, those plants can't survive there.
So let me just so you can then, when you see a graph like this, you're then able to make predictions about what you can see on those plants on the ground, what type of plant type it's going to be, whether you can create a rainforest with that.
Yeah, you've got microhabitat, sorry, microclimates as well. But yes, on a broad sense, I can say this is the likely. Remember that first silhouette I showed you had 4 different terrains. They all had the same rainfall, but you've got 4 different biomes in the same area. But that's because although you have the same rainfall, you've got different wind conditions, different soil conditions, things like that. But on a broad sense, yes, I look at this and I know it's really hot in the middle of the year. So, you know, 30 degrees Celsius in the middle of the year. So, you know, you're up there in the 90s. You've got a hell of a lot of rain in the middle of the year. It's going to be a kind of a tropical savanna environment.
That's cool. Let's take a look at some of the other visualizations that you've created to help people think about this. And by the way, the book is not only visualizations. There's really rich descriptions of things.
We haven't put it in this. We're not doing it in this display, but the book actually has loads of animal photos right throughout.
Yes, yeah.
Lots and lots of animal photos.
I'll do a page flip on that.
Yeah, but this is just the technical stuff to get you there. All right. So what we started doing is looking at it. Okay, let's try and use these. So people should be able to say where they are in the world and use it to predict what they're looking at. So this is a cross section through India, and you see that at point A, you're in that thorn scrub that continues right through northwest India into Pakistan, and then blends into the African savannas. Actually, that thorn scrub. And in this area where I'm with the dry deciduous forest and the moist deciduous forest, that's what people think of when they're going, when they think of the main tiger reserves in India. Ranthambore, Bandhavgarh, that kind of environment. The Indian jungle as such is actually this kind of deciduous forest. And then you just follow it up the side of the Himalayas. So you can see it gradually gets wetter, and it gradually gets colder as we're heading up the hill.
So Iain, I've got a kind of an odd question for you. As this talk has been going on, I've started to hear increasing noises of little animals outside. Is that the dawn chorus where you are? We're a
little bit away from dawn chorus. Some of the birds have started though, yeah. So we've got jungle drongo, there's orange-footed scrub fowl calling, we've got butcherbirds calling. Yeah, it's going to get louder.
Oh, that's really cool.
A lot louder.
That's fun.
I've got flying foxes with a wingspan of 1 meter that are, this branch right behind me is in fruit. So when we first started it, there was a flying fox about 10 feet away from me. Oh. So if it flies in front of the screen, you'll know.
That is really cool. So here you're helping us kind of think about how these graphs sort of change across a place, and you've got these similar sorts of things for all sorts of different regions in the world. How these graphs fit into these graphs, and how those connect together across a continent.
Yeah, and you start, and it'll start to all tie in together. And then it gets back to the animals later on. And an interesting aside is the earliest vegetation map was the oldest vegetation map was 3,000 years old from China, and it was all animals. It didn't talk about vegetation. It was the rhino broadleaf forests, the monkeys fine leaf forest. It just it's all anyway. Yep.
Right.
So this now here's an interesting thing through Australia. Just have a look at it for a second, and I don't want to bog people down, but look at the way the rainfall regime changes. So remember,
and then you see that direct relationship with.
Yeah. So we're in the southern hemisphere now. So the middle of the year is the coldest time of the year. Okay. And so at point A, we're dealing with climates that are fairly similar to the Californian climate. Cold, wet winters. And then we start moving up, and we start get over on the coast, we start getting warm, wet summers. So
this really makes me want to make one of these graphs for my region and have that just sort of in the front of my own nature journal, so that, or if I'm going to be going to a different place, just to sort of copy down that graph to kind of help me think big picture. One quick question on this. I noticed that the graphs for subtropical rainforest and heathland are rather similar, but the vegetation appearance is really, really different. Yep. Is that because of a soil characteristic that's going on?
Yeah, what happened? Yep. What happens is in Eastern Australia, you've got a massive sandstone, a Permian sandstone, and it is very inert. It's just, the soils are poor. And so you end up with these almost podzols, inert sandy soils. On above that, but on the crest, you've got these narrabeen shales, and they are much more nutrient rich. So it's a combination of rainfall and the nutrients of the soil.
Oh, that's neat. And that's also really richly described in the text of the book. Sort of what is.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you can be in these environments that are so different. They're so different, and they're together. And that's what we're working on another book now, which is we're going more into each local zone. So we're doing North America. We're going to be doing North America, but where we dive right in and start looking at it and saying, okay, well, let's look at the blend between heathlands and savannas, but really looking at the way these boundaries are, whether they're mosaics, melanges, how they all interact with the same climate.
This is such a different way of thinking about sort of being in nature than focus on this species, this species, this species. You're just, this is really, really useful.
Well, so I have a bird tour company, right? So tropical birding, for 20 years, we've been taking people out and doing what you said, the lists. We go and get birds. And it's all been destination based. And the last set of tours that I've been writing up for Northern Australia are now habitat based. So whereas before I would say, today we're going to go to the Daintree, and then we're going to go to Mareeba. Now it's okay. This morning we are concentrating on eucalypt savanna. Then we're concentrating on Molucca savanna, and we're trying to look at it. So when people do a day, when people are on nature tours, you have an animal list at the bottom at the end of a day. We always do an animal list. And what I want to do is change that. So now the very first thing you do, where were we today? Not we were out, in just north of Tucson. That's no longer going to be the way we do it. It's where were we today? This morning we were in Columnar Desert.
Yeah.
And then we spent the afternoon in Saltbrush Desert. And that's the way I think as nature watchers. I think we need to take that next step.
That's nature. That's nature observation 2.0.
Yeah.
I think that framing is incredibly powerful. what I want to do is to bounce to a different type of visualization here,
Sure.
because these little triangles, I mean, this is really, I think thinking of this both as what the information that is contained here, but also for us to start thinking about how to summarize information in a triangle graph is also going to be really interesting to people.
Well, yeah, and that comes back. Actually, the first person that I showed, well, one of the people I showed this to when I was first doing this, asked whether I was a geochemist, because that was my training at uni. And it's where you're looking at not 2 parameters, but three parameters. So looking at these graphs, what I'm trying to show is it's not, you've got the 3 main characteristics. One is water, okay? Now, so water is absolute water.
So that would be along this left axis of this graph, right?
No, the top, the top, the very,
okay.
the top. That's water dominant. That's 100% absolutely. Okay. And then the bottom of the graph is where water is completely irrelevant. Absolute water is irrelevant. Okay.
All right. Okay.
Drought, the bottom left is drought. So at that point, it's not absolute water now. It's the period of intense dryness. So notice rather than saying lack of water, I've got drought, which means absence of water in a temporal period, in temporal fashion. And then on the last one, I've got fire dominant regimes. So
so the axis of each of these graphs, say from the fire dominant corner, this is high fire dominance, and then I go straight across the middle, to low dominance of fire along this side here. Exactly.
So imagine something that's halfway between water and drought. Okay, so it's halfway between water and drought, where there is no fire. Fire does not play a part in this habitat.
All right. Then I'm in thorn forest, right?
Thorn forest. Yep.
Okay. So again, what we did here is on the fire axis, which goes straight through the middle here. Whoops. Hey, come back. All right. On the fire axis, we're going to take that all the way down, and then we're going to go halfway between water dominant and drought dominant, and then that. So when you then are mapping these out, look at, this is so interesting. Look at the patterns that makes for where you are. Wouldn't that be neat to see for the specific region where you live?
And that's what yep, this is a global thing. And what we're doing is we're making that, Phil Choan is the co-author on this book, well, one of the co-authors on this book with me, and he's the primary author on the new North American version, and he's diving right into that. And it's a case of what's happening is it's going to be every region. All right, so we are in Northern Ohio. What is the triangle for Northern Ohio?
Oh, see, I want the triangle for my area right here. I mean, think about this, folks. You could try to create the triangle for your local region. I mean,
and that becomes this last one becomes important when we go to the very end, whereas predicting what's going to happen with habitats.
Should we bounce
with drying, when you start drying habitats, or some areas are going to get wetter with climate change. Some are going to get drier. The fire regimes are changing. We're losing species in Australia at the moment. We've got golden-shouldered parrot, which looks as though we're losing it, and it's probably because of a change in fire regime. Whereas before, fire used to come at the end of the dry season, okay, just before the wet season, but right at the end of the dry season, and it would burn hot, not crazy hot, but it would burn hot enough to kill off saplings of acacias and saplings of melaleucas. What's happening now is some people thought that the idea would be burn the grass earlier in the season. There's less carbon dioxide put off. It may be a way of doing carbon capture. Well, what happens is you're burning earlier in the season. The the grass doesn't burn as hot, you're not killing those saplings, and the savanna's being smothered. And the habitats are actually changing in the 20 years that I've been going up into them. So this is where it does actually become quite important to look at. Yeah, it's going to get worse. So the habitats are changing as we're going out every year. We're seeing it in some of these places.
So I love the predictive nature of this. So I'm just sort of thinking, say, let's say I'm here in a temperate region, and I pick my whatever habitat I have, and I can think to myself then, this allows me then to predict how I would expect that to change if things got drier and more and with more fire.
Yeah. So the chenopod is equivalent to your salt bushes. Okay. So your junipers will go to salt bush plains. The fine boss is the word that we're using, heathland fine boss Mediterranean. That's the I don't actually know how to pronounce it. Is it chaparral or chaparral?
Chaparral.
Chaparral. Okay, well that's your fine boss heathland. In your temperate zones, that's what you get. Yeah. A fire-dominated habitat that.
Yeah, and so in the Sierra Nevada mountains, what we're looking at is as the things are heating up, and as the fire frequency becomes much shorter interval, transformation of things that in my lifetime and for a long time have been pine forests into scrubland into scrublands. I mean, this is really fun. This is fun. But folks, the idea here of a triangle graph where you can have three, and remember, each one has an axis that goes from the corner that it's on through the middle, right? How might you be able to use this, not just to understand these sorts of graphs, but for conveying relationships between other sorts of things? Like if you have a graph showing a relationship between two different things, we've seen lots of graphs in our lifetimes showing you the relationship between two different things. But here you're looking at kind of classifications from three different variables. That's a really useful visual idea. We are going to
this is tough. Let me have a go at this. This is a concept that hadn't been dealt before this book. Again, in the book, we're throwing in lots of new concepts that are not put out in the public sphere, because really, people are not going to pick up a book and read about, oh, I wonder what's more important, precipitation or temperature.
Doesn't have a grabby title.
No, but if you throw it in as a sidebar in the book, so what you're looking at, guys, is again, we'll do the flip through, but when you're in the book, you've got the different habitats in North America, you've got photos of animals and photos of birds, lots of glossy pictures. And I've kind of slid these kinds of diagrams in there, just so you get a look at it and think, okay, well, let's, I'm reading it. I'm going to spend the 10 minutes to try and understand this concept. What's this showing is there are habitats that occur over a broad range of precipitation, okay, like the rainforests. So you go to 1200 mils, which is 36 inches a year. Above that, for as long as it goes, the habitat's rainforest. But then you've got some habitats that occur over a narrow temperature range, but over a broad a narrow rainfall range over a broad temperature range, both in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. And that's these semi-deciduous forests and dry deciduous forests. See how they're a very narrow habitat.
Yeah.
And what we've found is that, and I plotted these up from going through around the world and looking at, okay, let's go through this latitude and let's follow it around the world. And I'm actually, as I'm following it around the world, I'm marking what the different habitats are as I go around, and then go to the next latitude. It was actually a lot of fun, a great way to waste 4 or 5 days of your life. If you've ever, to actually, for me to play around and do this. But it is one of those things where you see Mediterranean scrub, that's your chaparral. Look how it occurs on both sides of the world. Sorry, both hemispheres.
Yeah.
The steppes occur on both, savannas.
So yeah, all these plants from South Africa grow really well here in California. So I'm up here in California, and plants from South Africa, when they go like gangbusters when they get out here.
Mm-hmm. So there was a question from Mary Larson. What was that question? Sorry, can I see that?
Let's see.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry. Temperate deciduous forest. Oh, we're okay. Yeah, Virginia. Yeah. Virginia is temperate deciduous. What we call summer deciduous. It's also mosaic, temperate mosaic, which is a deciduous forest but with a conifer component. Also, here's the craziest thing about Virginia, is that at the time that settlers or white settlers turned up, that over a third of Virginia was a savanna. It had a massive savanna component, and that's where we're getting at with the fire. When we're working in North America, I'm heading back there now. There's a guy called Chris Ludwig, and he was with the Virginia National Park System. I can't remember what the name was, and he's working on purchasing lands that were savanna terrains when whites first got there, and then looking at how do we recreate that now. So getting those deciduous forests back to the savannas that they were, because there you've had a less fire, and the savannas the Virginian savannas are being destroyed. So that's an area that I want to go back and spend a lot more time with.
This is beautiful. These sort of patterns and things makes you think about the planet in a totally different way. So in a moment, we're going to be doing a page flip with the book, and you're going to be able to see that, there are things just sort of mapping in very, very precisely, very, very specifically what is going on in each little spot on the globe. But then there's also these kind of unifying ideas that help you kind of think about why that is and what are the big picture patterns, whether that's here looking at the connection between latitude and precipitation and or fire and moisture.
And these are all, remember, these are all just the predominant vegetation / even biome at the location, it's not limiting you as to one. And this is, again, where I wanted to write this book, was because we sit there and we only think of, you wait till the Frybirds are about to start, then it gets really bad. We sit there and think about, okay, you look at a vegetation map. Oh, okay, well, there we are. We're in conifer forest. It says it here on the map. Where really at any one location, you can be looking at 5 or 6 different vegetation types, which again makes me think, all right, well, if that's the case, why are we not mapping them the way we do animals? You would never look at a bird book and open up and say, oh, well, we're here, it's got to be blue jay because that's the bird that's mapped here. No other birds mapped here because we can only map one at each location. That's what's happening with the way when I open up vegetation books, and that's what bugs me when I open them up. That's why I did this. So every habitat in this book is treated as a species. I try and write it, that's why it's called a field guide. I try and write it as though the habitats are species. So you can have, look, a distribution map. You've got your high elevation pines, that's where they are. You've got your mixed conifers. So when you take the field guide out into with you, you may be dealing with 4 or 5, and you can look up which habitats you're actually in based on the distribution map. It's not limiting to telling you that that's the only
let's
one.
take a look at that book at kind of the page flip now, so people can kind of see how those ideas are kind of interlaced.
Sure.
Now I'm going to try this with my document camera here, but as you saw, my document camera, I discovered the other day that for some reason it's wanting to kind of cut out in the middle and turn my screen off. So we will hope that this will work. This is a new problem as of this week. So here we have an upside down book. There we are. All right.
And the cover's by Christine Elder. Let's just give her a shout out because I'm so happy with the way she did it.
And she's a nature journaler.
Oh yeah.
So I'm kind of opening it up here. I'm in. You're seeing these cross-section diagrams. I'm seeing maps of the world, specifically where those are, and the moisture graphs.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, habitat pictures and kind of some of the lovely beasties that are in there. You're talking about what animals are there, what you'd expect to see in different sorts of things with reptiles, and also kind of what the forest kind of cover is like. So for
have a look there at actually where the next page you're turning. Let's go to that page you're turning to. No, where your other finger is, Jack. Oh, it doesn't matter. Let's do it with that one. Also, in a nutshell, have a look at the in a nutshell.
Oh, in a nutshell.
What that is it's trying to put, first of all, it puts the habitat into a global perspective. So it's always designed for someone who's never been there. How can they relate to that habitat? So it'll talk about if it's so what am I calling it? I'm talking about there. It gives a very brief description of what it is, but then look at habitat affinities. No other habitat in the world has this mixture of small conifers and acacias. It just doesn't have one. Whereas other habitats, I'll open up and I'll say, go turn to the next one, pick that one. Habitat affinities, Palearctic semi-desert. So Palearctic is Eurasia, okay, that's Europe and Asia. So by habitat affinities, you should be able to look at it and say, is there anything from North America that relates to this? Near tropical semi-desert scrub, okay, that's the same kind of stuff that occurs around Europe and around the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And then species overlap, that talks about how this habitat relates to the surrounding habitats. So species overlap is the other habitats in the area that have similar animal assemblages, whereas the affinities is other habitats around the world that give you the same.
Oh, I get it. Yes.
So you should be able to work out where, okay, this is what it's going to feel like.
That's brilliant. So then you're also just kind of going into there's sort of deep so here we're going to kind of get into one of these sort of then it's broken out sort of geographically into these different areas. You're showing how they connect with each other. Each section sort of starts with an overview of how those little pieces in that fit into each other.
Yep.
And then you can get into the individual ones, and you're going to see those affinities and species overlap. Species overlap being the ones that are kind of have the adjacencies with them, the affinities being ones that really have the same feel because of climatic conditions and other conditions, but in other locations around the world.
Yep. Yeah.
All right. That makes just. I really like the way you're thinking about this. That's really fun.
Well, this all started originally. It started with me having Americans in Australia and having problems describing where we were and also what we were doing. And I was living in South America and I was guiding some Americans up in China. And this bird came in and it was a tough bird. And I called out to the people, I described where it was. I told them it was in the pine tree. And the bird left, no one saw the bird. And this lady on the tour started actually yelling at me, calling me incompetent because I called it a pine tree. In Australia, every conifer is called a pine. So the araucarias are called hoop pines or Norfolk pines. There's a kind of cypress that we call pine. We call it cypress pine. So I'm up there in China and I see this conifer and it's, oh, okay, it's a pine. So to realize that I didn't speak American botany at the time, and they didn't speak Australian botany. And that's why I wanted to do it. So I did this bird book for Australia. So Princeton wanted me to do birds of Australia. And I said, look, I'll do it. But primarily, if you can give me 50 pages at the front that I can just do habitats, because that's the key to working out how to find birds in Australia. I did it, book got okay reviews, well, got good reviews, but the habitat section got really good reviews. Oh, this place here, have a look at that one there. Can you imagine that? I mean, look
that is nuts. Let's sort of zoom down on this. I'm just kind of doing this. Sometimes I'll pick up a bird book and kind of flip through it and kind of like, oh, I want to go to that habitat. I want to go to that. See that bird. But now you've got me doing this with habitats.
I know, and this is one of the few that I haven't seen. And what kills me is that airlines have just opened up flights. Have a look at where Socotra is. Have a look at the map on there. So show them the map, Jack. No, the page you were just on. There's a distribution map for it. I mean, it's this island between Yemen and Somalia with this crazy forest in a desert, and that just got
the dragon blood semi-desert.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know the whole planet was just so beautiful. I mean, and airlines have just started flights from Abu Dhabi to Socotra. I'm now stuck in Queensland, Australia. They're not letting me out. And Phil, and you want to go see some dragon blood.
Well, Phil's going there in a few weeks. I'm not happy about it at all.
Oh dear. But before we're kind of coming up against our time here. Before we kind of close, I also just want to kind of call out that the sidebars that you put in the book are also just really useful nuggets that help people understand kind of key geographic elements of what is going on. Those are also very clear, very useful, and very deliberate things that might not be in somebody's
and I didn't want to put them in the introduction because no one reads introductions.
I like the sidebar idea.
Yeah, we've put it right through. So I've gone through. If you read the sidebars alone, you'll get an understanding of geology, geomorphology. I've got some in there. I've actually got one sidebar in there that I just couldn't resist because I did my postgraduate research on it. That is pretty much master's level arguments on soil geochemistry, but it's on the way dewey crusts form and that they form, and because of them, you get desertification and destruction in barren lands. So it's doing what I did, which was for gold and aluminium, but putting it into making it relevant to what happens on the planet when you clear a topsoil. Yeah. And I've got all of these things that I want to keep. With the new North American one, we're doing more of that. I just want to have it so these bits of science that people produce, these scientists make it, they write papers that are only read by the friends that reviewed them. So you can have someone doing this great science and it gets read by a couple of people. I mean, and I'm serious there. Some of these yes. Whereas if we can put it in sidebars and get people access to it, you've now taken that same bit of information and given it to 20,000 people.
Yes. Yeah. No, this is, I really like the thinking in this, and I'm really excited about thinking about like how can this then interact with my own process of nature journaling and connecting with the world. This is the amount of thinking that has gone into this is just, it's such a delight to geek out on. So you also, you'll break down what are the animals, what are the kind of the critical aspects that make this each little habitat work. This is really fun. This is really, really fun. So I am wow, I can see the, thank you so much for getting up in the middle of the night. It's been fun to watch the Australian morning appear over your shoulder.
With a black butcher bird.
Oh, wait, hold on. Let's
Sorry.
I want, let's see that butcher bird again. I'm going to make my screen.
He's just gone off.
But no way of getting that flying fox to come on back for us.
No, flying foxes are gone. Butcher birds are in now. Now it's bird time.
All right. This is fascinating. Again, Iain is also the behind Tropical Birding, which is a wonderful initially kind of bird watching world tour group. You're helping our Nature Journal Club go to the Galapagos Islands, and you're going to be helping us organize Ecuadorian tours and some other sort of things. So thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate your, you think of somebody who's been, doing kind of a deep dive, doing birding tours, that your perspective would be this narrow, like, I'm going to get my bird list and get my eBird list higher. But well,
I did that until I mean, this is what happened. I did that until I was on a tour in China, and we were heading up to this mountain for this leaf warbler, which is it looks identical to another species, and I thought, I'm actually not enjoying it. I'm not. I had to really sit and reevaluate what I was doing, where the number, the list, had become more important than the actual experience of seeing it. And I think that's going to happen to birding in general. I think you find that people who are hardcore birders, they get more into moths, they get more into butterflies, because it's just a little bit consumerist. And I know this is my client base, but when you're only just going after the list and you're not trying to get the feel for the place, I think it lacks something. So that's why I've moved away from that to try and get people to actually experience where they are. So more into conservation, more into actual looking at things. And that's why the nature journaling was so appealing to me, even though I'm talentless. I wanted to see it. Yeah.
Well, we're really lucky to have made this connection. I think that I'm looking forward to working more with you, and also I think that this framing for how to observe in nature is going to add levels of complexity, beauty, and wonder. Just to be in a place where, like, we're right at the point where this habitat is transitioning into this one. Like, this is all of a sudden that becomes something that normally you just pass on through, but it gets you sort of you know, I remember I took a class once on spiders, and after that I was seeing spiders everywhere, and it was really exciting. I think that this could also do the same for just, you know, biomes of the world, and really, really grateful for it.
Cool. Thanks very much.
Do we, I think there are some folks in the community that would love to sort of pepper you with some questions.
Sure.
So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of open this up to kind of a community discussion. If folks have questions for Iain and about this or visualization, this is a great time to do that. So the best way to do that is to go over to, just turn on your camera and kind of give us a wave or a thumbs up, and we'll notice you and can bring you on live with myself and Iain. Or we may be being shy today. I'm going to bring on Ivea, the mad botanist, who's going to get us started here.
No, not the botanist.
I have to say, when I read your description about how it can't be all about the plants and stuff, I was like, I feel very called out. But no, I appreciate that very much. Thank you. You've given me a lot of really fun ideas that I'm going to be using at my restoration site to try to document some things. So I'm really excited. So my question was more of a minor technical question, but when you say stencil, like, are you talking one that you make and cut out about the trees? Or are you talking about more a mental image of what the main features of the trees are so that you can simplify?
Oh no, what I do, okay, so I've gone and I try and find an example of the tree and photograph that in the background. So I did this trip. So there's one cross section that shows you all the different ones right through West Africa. Well, I did that by going around Senegal and finding the tree and getting it where it's very little overlap with other species, photographing it, then going into Photoshop and turning it into a black and white stencil and cutting it out. That's how I did it. Again, I really wish it's so frustrating to be there with someone who can just do this with a pen and a brush. They're painting it and I'm thinking, oh no, I can't do that. I've got to go and do it the hard way. So essentially the way I almost look at it, the way I make them is rather than drawing it, I do it with an eraser on the computer, in that I get the shape, and then it's like, oh no, that's not right. So I cut that out, and then I scale it and skew it. So I might use the same base for 10 different plant types, but rather than drawing, it's puppet warping and stuff like that. I just wish, again, I just can't draw
yet. If you start hanging out with us a lot, we're going to put a sketchbook in your hands, and then you're going to discover that it is a skill that you can develop.
I did it. I came home from the conference in Monterey with the picture of the orca that I'd done, and I'm like, yeah.
But in terms of your visual thinking is just, you've developed your visual thinking chops so beautifully to kind of come up with some of these strategies and kind of how those pieces fit together. So I really, really respect that.
And plus, even us nature journalists don't necessarily know how to draw those stencils very well. That's why I was asking, because while you were talking about that, I was thinking, but how would I be able to draw the difference in silhouette between like a coyote brush with their infinitely small little leaves, and then versus like a ceanothus, but I guess that would be more about the branches, and then like the toyon versus the eucalyptus, because it's hard to think about how I would be able to get that silhouette just right. And so that's why I was so curious about how you do it. My thought would be to practice by taking either a picture or magazine out and then tracing it with your pen until you get good at doing it like that. And then you can sort of begin to practice enough times. But
what I found was there are certain kinds of plants that have a very similar feel and a very similar shape, and it's mainly the seed pods that set them apart. So I used what was I used the salt bush, a combination of a salt bush in Australia and the tamarisk. I combined those two. So one's from Africa, one's from Australia. Combined them to make the plants that are in the Central Asian deserts, because I couldn't find a right photo of the Central Asian desert. I couldn't find the plants. I saw photos, so I was looking online and I'm getting the photos and I'm thinking, okay. But I realized that, hang on, if I get this image, if I get this silhouette and I get this silhouette, use the branches off this, and the leaves off this, I get the Central Asian plant.
Yeah, it's a collage.
Yeah.
And just, whether your tools are digital or whether your tools are analog, I'm afraid, Iain, you're still an artist.
Yeah.
Well,
and
yeah.
The important thing is getting the information. The important thing is the information. I mean, like, you look at this isn't a very fancy drawing, but it gets the information that I want, which is that I turn the pile from being flat to tall. It's like, it doesn't have to be a fancy drawing. And then, sorry, I had one more question, and then I'll
keep going.
With how you name these environments, like I noticed that you named the salt brush or the kinopode type one with that one tree, I think it was a Mali, I can't remember, but is it that you're looking for whatever species are the most dominant in terms of have the most numbers, or is it a different thing where certain species have certain traits that make them really stand out that you're looking for, like architecture?
Well, that's an interesting question, because when you look at vegetation maps that are done, it's usually the canopy tree, isn't it? The dominant canopy tree usually gets the name. And these names, I did it based on I tried to go with what the main name is in the area. If there's a main name in the area and it's so extensive, I kind of go with it. And so there may be someone, I'm pretty sure there's going to be someone from Venezuela who is annoyed that I use the Brazilian term. I use the Brazilian savanna term to go and because that's where most of the habitat is. There'll be someone, well, I already know there are people in Spain who are not happy that I use the French word. They call it mattoral, the French call it marquis. There's actually more places in the world where they call it marquis. So through all those North African French-speaking countries. So that's where I've had to use those terms. Sometimes I made it up. I'm just like, I had to think, okay, what do I call the conifer forests of Australia? There's no actual name for them because them being called temperate rainforest will know. So I called it Gondwanan conifer forests. It was tough. I've tried to keep everyone happy, or at least but there are going to be people that think, well, hang on, that's not what I call it. Yeah, that is not. Yeah, but you're next to a country with 300 million people that call it that other thing. So let's go. Let's go with them.
I like it.
Thank you so much.
Oh, pleasure.
Did anybody else have a question or thought? I'd like to our friend Walters currently. I'm going to bring Walters is down on the Canary Islands right now. Is from Latvia, and so seen a lot of a diversity of habitats.
They've got a habitat in Latvia that I haven't seen. So it's interesting. In Latvia, you've got it's a combination between beech forests. Okay, so you've got the beech forests of the south, and then you've got spruce forests of the north. Latvia is in that overlap zone where you've got the southernmost spruce and the northernmost beech. So
we have those kind of forests, yeah, by the like by the beaches where there are dunes, there's just like pine forests with kind of small pines, and then between those you can see a lot of these like northern like boreal forests kind of. So yeah, there's a lot of mixture. Like there's some forests that really look like they should be more in the south, and then there are some that look like they could be in Norway or so. It's very interesting in that area. Yes.
It is, and it's also the birding assemblage there. The bird assemblage of resident birds is an overlap. I haven't been there. I was trying to get there. I was trying to get up there. So yeah, the closest to you where I've been is northern Germany, and then into Finland. But I haven't been across to you. But you'll find that the book is lacking in that. That's one area that we just couldn't, because for all of the Palearctic, we only had the same amount of space. So you've got a couple of habitats, microhabitats. On a global scale, they're micro. You're talking about Latvia, Estonia, southern Sweden. It's not exactly a big area, except you've got a very particular habitat. So I apologize. I apologize.
But it's very interesting. What I have noticed is that that forests don't differ that much, like from south to north, but to west, but like from west to east. On the western side of Latvia, there's kind of more pines and, as you say, beech kind of forests. And on the eastern side, closer to Russia, there's like these northern boreal forests. And somewhere in the middle or in the northern part of West Latvia, they're mixed together. So there's not much of a difference. Like from in the south, there's pines, in the north, there's the boreal forest, but it's like west and east. So they kind of change in that sphere. So
have a look at the climate graphs. If you were to see how I plotted those graphs, okay? Get that information. And if you want, send me a note and I can show you how to do it. But if you can plot that same graph from the western side of your country to the eastern, I would bet London to a brick that the eastern side is far colder.
It is.
And probably a little drier, because where your habitat occurs, because I've done it in Sweden, where your habitat occurs there, that same habitat is right on the southernmost, the southernmost side of that peninsula, and then it wraps up. So I haven't done the temperature. Yeah.
The east is definitely colder, and it is definitely also hotter in summer. So because it's more inland, kind of on the west side, the sea keeps it way like a bit closer temperatures, like but on the eastern side, it definitely differs a lot more. So yeah, the eastern side is definitely a lot more different than the west side. But my question was with the temperatures and I think it was the humidity in the air. If the temperature goes above the humidity, the plants have stress. I didn't understand that graph.
So if you plot, can you, Jack?
Yep, I'm doing that right now. I'll bring
the
that up.
Mediterranean one. We didn't actually look at the Mediterranean one, but that's a good one to look at.
Okay, let me pull that up in just a second.
So you understand the concept that above 100 millimeters, it doesn't matter about the temperature. It's always going to be very, very, very wet. Okay, that's the first concept. When you got that much water, at the moment, with the way the planet works at the moment, with that much water, no plant's ever going to be stressed. But if we pull up the Mediterranean climate graph, I'll be able to explain that to you. But yeah, so what you do is you plot. No, down number 16.
Number 16. There you go.
Okay. All right. Oh. So look here. When you plot, so you plot on the one side your temperature in Celsius at 10-degree intervals, and at the same time you put the precipitation at 20 millimeter intervals on the left. and plot the two, you'll see that plants, so if your temperature's going up, but your rainfall's going up, your plants are okay. If your temperature's dropping and your rainfall is dropping, the plants are still okay. But once you have a situation where your plot at the millimeter plot goes above the temperature plot, sorry, another bird came in. Once you
when that happens, you have to just turn your screen over to it, and we can vicariously bird off your porch.
Just point. That's when plants undergo stress, and that's where you'll be able to plot it. So it would be really fascinating to see whether overall you get any color change. I don't think you'll get color change between the east and the west. They're still going to be in the general blue, but I'm thinking that you might have periods of darker blue in Western Latvia. But that's how you plot those. So there's actually a game that I started doing, and I put it out to our clients, where I would do a silhouette, a temperature graph, a photo of a habitat, and a photograph of an animal. And I had 4 of each, and I put it into this big matrix of 16 and told them, okay, go for it. So you should be able to look at it. You should be able to look and think, okay, that silhouette should go to that rainforest. That's what it looks like. And that's where the toucan is.
Oh, what fun.
Where another one might be, if you've got a cheetah, it's going to be the area with the grassland, the savanna, the grassland savanna photo, and a climate graph that shows that long periods of orange, of drought conditions, and a couple of wet conditions.
Okay, I'm gonna try to look more into that, because I've noticed there's a difference between the kind of microclimates between Western and Eastern, but I've never thought about it in a deeper way. But I'm not going to be home for a while, so
yeah, and it's that combination. So here's another thing about Europe, which is really kind of crazy. Europe hasn't come into equilibrium since the last ice age. The vegetation still hasn't reached equilibrium. So what happens?
I'm not sure what equilibrium is.
Okay, equilibrium is where everything is in tune, everything is in balance.
Oh, okay.
Because in Eastern Asia and in North America, the glaciers came up and down with different ice ages. The animals and plants moved up and down. In Europe, because of your east-west mountain ranges, you had blockages, and it's been harder for the plants to move up at the same rate. So what's happened is you should have more plant species in Latvia than you actually do. Some of the plants are still kind of creeping their way north from the end of the last ice age. So you've got a situation where you've got beech there, but there should be other ones as well. And off the top of my head, I don't remember which species they are. But it's again, Latvia is that really interesting thing where you've got the boreal, you've got the southernmost spruce, and the northernmost beech overlap. It's one of those few parts of the world where that happens.
I've never thought about the sort of the impact of east-west mountain ranges and how that would have kind of interacted with glaciations. I mean, I guess I've just been in a place with, grew up in a place where there are big north-south mountain ranges, and so I never thought about that.
It's the reason that Europe, and it's hard. You don't want to say depauperate because you don't want to slam. It's not slamming Europe. It's just what it is. Okay, East Asia has far more birds, animals, and plants than in the equivalent forest in Europe. And it's only because in East Asia, every time you had the glaciation, you had refugia that could hold it and it could expand up again. Whereas with those mountain ranges, things went into extinction, bottlenecked into extinction.
So in the other parts, there was some kind of like a refugee for the plants to stay alive and the animals, but these parts like Latvia just had been swept, sort of everything.
It goes down, and there's nothing, and it's harder for things to come back up. And as things are coming back up, it goes down again. And that quick cycle just puts too much long-term stress on a lot of plant species. So for the same, if you're looking at the same kind of forest let's just say these deciduous forests, there are three broad zones. There's eastern United States, Europe, Asia. Europe is the most depauperate. That's the one. Asia is the richest, and the US is somewhere in between. Wow, a raptor just came through and took out a Eurasian imperial pigeon. So what you've got there is it feels very different. So you look at structurally, it feels the same when you first see it. You walk into a forest in Germany's where I've spent most of my time, Germany and Austria. But then you walk into that same kind of forest in Sichuan, in central China, and it's like, whoa, many, many more birds. And it's purely because of that constant stress.
Yeah.
But there is another thing in Eastern Europe, that if you can get down to Georgia or Turkey, there's a habitat down there which is it's the world's only real deciduous rainforest. So it's a rainforest that's made of the European trees, but the understory is predominantly Himalayan. It's this crazy thing. It's another one I need to go to. Imagine being in something that is it just feels like a rainforest, but the trees are, it snows in winter.
Yeah. Which is like a rainforest, but with the European trees, not with the. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This just brings so much more richness to playing around on this planet. I feel like I was thinking about some of these ideas before, but actually it is in this last hour talking to you, Iain, here, that I feel like the scales have been removed from my eyes. Like that there is another level of complexity to kind of get my geek on about. This is really, really fun.
Yep, it is fun.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
One thing you said about like there's more like the same kind of a forest somewhat in Asia and in Europe, and there's going to be more birds in Europe and Asia. Here on the Canary Islands, and up in the north of the island, I'm on Tenerife. Here in the south is just like complete desert with some coastal desert scrub, sort of say, And up in the north, there's laurel forests, which are just green, just with moss there, and it's just very, very green. But there's a very, very little birds here, and just there's a lot of flora, but fauna is just kind of. So that's interesting. The forest is like the forest is just like, you think there should be like parrots and everything here, but there's not much here bird wise. So
sometimes you hit those habitats that just doesn't gel. Like something isn't quite right. It's natural. It just doesn't feel like the way it should be. Yeah, you see big green trees, you think, okay, it should be loaded.
It feels like there should be more. I was in Seychelles a couple of years ago, and there's the same kind of forest, similar to it. There's just bird there, bird there, bird there, bird there. Here it's kind of a bit less. So it's
good birding during migration. Yeah, it's one of those areas that's more during migration.
Yeah, definitely. yeah, that's all. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Cheers.
Walters, thank you for joining us. So it's about time for us to bring our discussion here to a close. We've got one more question from Ray Bonto and Arpan Sen. And then we'll be wrapping up our discussion for the day. Let's bounce over to London. And with Arpan, good to see you. Let me see if I can allow you to unmute. There you go.
Hey.
Hi, Ian. Hi, Jack. Amazing session. I work a lot on visualizations, but that's from a totally business perspective. So I was extremely inspired by the charts that you presented. One thing that really struck me was the shape of the graphs itself. So what kind of thoughts do you go through to come up with something like a triangle? So are you trying to track the dimensions? Are you trying to track? So I'm trying to understand what determines the overall shape of the thing.
My reason for the triangles, it's like I get criticized by everyone for, not criticized, I get questioned about the triangles a lot. It's in geochemistry, you tend to do multivariate analysis. These things, I can either do it as a three-dimensional block, but what I've tried to do, when you're doing geology and you're talking with sediments, they use triangular graphs a lot because it's based on the combination of the relative percentages of clays, sands, and loams. And when I'm dealing with bauxite, I used it as well. So it's mainly to deal with where I've got more than just the two variables. And there is actually, you can turn that triangular graph into a triangular prism as well. And I tried to do that as a triangular prism and it just was a disaster. I mean, I could see it, but other people don't see it like that. And that one of the things that's come through this project is I visualize things differently than a lot of people. And I've had a whole series. I've had hexagonal graphs, all of it, just trying to put it into the way I visualize these things interacting. But there comes a point where people just get lost and it loses its effectiveness. But that's the reason I did it with that one, to try and show those three criteria. And if you look at it on a if you put the fourth dimension and turn it into a triangular prism, you can put temperature on there as well.
It's determined by how many variables you want to track.
Yep, it comes down to how many variables. So you can either do it as a series of, I could do it as a series of triangles. I could do it as a massive normal two-dimensional, two variable graphs. But that's the reason I've done the triangles. It's just because when I went through university, that's how we were taught. So even to the point where I did a business analysis on the way bird watching and photography have merged. The way bird watchers have gone from birding to nature photography to general nature, to loving general nature. And I plotted our clients' movements over 10 years. So I did surveys with them. And what I showed is that birders, again, when you look at it as that, they're just it. You know, it's only those three. It's got to add up to 100. What's most important to you? Are you 80% birds, 10% photography? Plotted it, and it showed that birders tend to go, when they get into photography, they switch right down into photography for a few years and then merge back into general wildlife. So a birder, picking a camera, will eventually make them more interested in mammals. But it's that same thing. It's the so yeah, my daughter is always going off at me about not bloody triangles again. No,
You're living your life right if that you're getting that response from the.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ian.
Yeah, I was just trying to find. I've got a geology manual that has a bunch of those triangle graphs in it, where they're using them to, they'll say that, take sedimentary rocks, and you'll have, what proportion are, silt, sand, or clay. And depending on the proportions of those three factors, then just as Ian had in that chart, the different regions would be blocked out, and those would, then you have the names of those different things. Mm-hmm. It's a really cool way to start visualize. We see lots of graphs that help us visualize 2 dimensions, and this gets you visualizing 3 dimensions. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really cool. That's
I tried a lot of other ones as well, and I just got told nope. You can't do it. And I can try to visualize it, I can show it, but people couldn't grasp it.
Also, do you use any different kind of tools, like in the computer or software or mathematical modeling, or just pen and paper?
No, I didn't. Not on this. I used to, before I became a full-time birder, I was doing geochemistry, and I did a lot of that in geochemistry. But so what I was thinking about doing is putting that on the website, so people can rotate it and get a feel that way. But for the book, they wouldn't do it. I pitched it to Princeton. The guys said, nope, it'll fail. So you're allowed triangles and no more.
Yeah, in one of our past Nature Journal workshops, one on geology, we got a little bit into triangle graphs. Mm-hmm. There. So if you think that may be in the archives. I mean, I love the different ways that information is presented in here. This is, and it's also interesting to kind of think about how, when you start thinking with pictures and images, it changes the way that you think about things.
Well, I know no one, it was a hard sell to try and get people to, I mean, the name of the book, how do you make a book like it is? And I do like it. I mean, I absolutely love the book. But how do you make it, even the name, accessible to people? It's like Habitats of the World. Who's going to pick that up? Really? No, I know. but it was like, trust me, just pick it up. Pick the damn thing up.
I got you. Yeah. That's great. Arpan, Ray Banto, good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Arpan, did we was your question answered to your?
Yeah. Sorry.
Excellent. Thank you. So I think it's about time for us to bring our meeting here to a close. And I want to just thank you again, Ian, for getting up very, very early in the morning Australia time to meet all of the rest of us around the world. What time did you have to get up for this?
We started at 4 a.m.
At 4 a.m. So that's some combat pay right there. So somebody did ask an interesting question here, and that is Carmen was asking that, sometimes when people buy a book on Amazon.com, Amazon makes the profit, you don't. Is there a specific site or place that people might go to support you better to pick up this book?
The Connecticut Audubon Shop. There you go. The first store that stocked it.
Okay, good for them. All right, so the Audubon Shop in Connecticut.
The Audubon Shop, Connecticut, yeah.
Connecticut Audubon Shop. All right, we'll see if we can find that.
But no, I mean, the overall, the percentage, the sales, I mean, look, it looks as though it's selling well, but you don't make that much money on books.
No, you don't.
I genuinely want people. This is genuinely something out of love. Also, it got me through COVID.
Yes, and what a productive thing to have done in the face of that epidemic. I'm really grateful for that. Any particular Connecticut Audubon shop there?
Yeah, I can't remember. No, I don't. I really wish I could remember the name of the place.
All right.
But it's Jerry Conley is the owner.
Huh.
So shout out. But he
All right.
supported
Shout
the concept of the book straight away.
That's good. All right. Thank you, Jerry. And again, thank you, Iain. Really, really grateful for your time. And this is a really exciting addition to the way we think about the world that we explore.
Cool. Thank you very much. Cheers, guys. Hope you liked it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, folks.